The United States just dropped a massive geopolitical bombshell on Canada, threatening to completely rip up the biggest trade deal in North American history. But what the mainstream media is absolutely refusing to tell you is the shocking secret leverage Canada actually holds behind closed doors, and why Washington might be walking into a devastating political trap.
We want to resolve as much as we can. We've worked really closely with the Mexicans over the past year. They've resolved a lot of issues. The Canadians, we have some issues with them that haven't been resolved yet. We aren't probably going to be able to resolve all issues by July 1st, but I think we are on track to resolve many of them and to move as quickly as we can.
At the same time, Greer said the U.S. may have to take steps to exit CUSMA in order to continue the talks.
Washington is holding a loaded economic gun directly to Ottawa's head. By publicly praising Mexico for bowing down and simultaneously isolating Canada, the U.S. government is using a ruthless, classic divide-and-conquer strategy to force massive, humiliating concessions. But while the United States plays hardball on economics, one insider just exposed a dark, hidden layer to this trade war that the establishment desperately wants to keep quiet.
The very first question that you asked me in terms of how could Canada be complicit, very specifically, it's about weapons being manufactured in Canada, being commercialized or sold or traded with the U.S. and then being used to do war crimes. So should we have that as a conversation as part of what we do with CUSMA? So it's very complex. There's a lot of business as usual, and we need to have a strong economy, and obviously you want to have a trade within North America. But there is a way in which even this whole segment brings so much cognitive dissonance that we need to be able to put two and two together and ask ourselves those existential questions. And this is what Mark Carney has been doing by trying to get out of just the dependency on the U.S. and make us deal more with other powers around the world.
This is absolutely chilling and completely changes the game. The narrative just violently flipped from boring auto tariffs to weapons of mass destruction and international war crimes. Canada is suddenly waking up to the terrifying reality that their total economic dependence on the American military-industrial complex makes them directly complicit in global atrocities. If the horrific moral cost of this alliance isn't enough to make Canada walk away, the actual economic terms of the upcoming deal might just be a total disaster waiting to happen.
And I think I can certainly appreciate that the business community needs, stability and predictability, and a signed CUSMA deal definitely gets us there. But I think it's also important to sort of look at what other countries and jurisdictions like the EU have agreed to in terms of a deal with the U.S. and note that their deals are kind of crappy. And not the kind of deal that Canada should be gunning for. So if there is a be calm and, stay calm, carry on kind of thing, I think that the Prime Minister is embodying that vibe quite well.
The political establishment is utterly terrified that Canada is about to get absolutely fleeced by Washington. They are looking at how the U.S. completely steamrolled the European Union, and they are desperately warning the Prime Minister not to sign a garbage, humiliating treaty just to appease a panicked corporate class. But what if the media is lying to you about who actually holds the real power in this high-stakes standoff?
The July 1st date is important to determine whether or not this deal goes for 10 years or 16 years. That's all that July 1st is about. The reason why we're negotiating is twofold. One, hopefully get a 16-year deal as opposed to a 10-year deal. But more importantly, number two, it's all of these national security tariffs that Trump has placed on Canadian aluminum, steel, auto, etc. Those are the things that Canada's trying to negotiate at the table.
Boom! The July 1st deadline is a complete illusion designed by the media to create fake panic among the masses. The real war isn't about the free trade agreement at all. It's a brutal hostage negotiation where the U.S. is using illegal national security tariffs to extort Canada into submission. Yet, just when it looks like the American empire holds all the cards, a shocking political reality threatens to completely derail their master plan.
And if it's going to be done in the construct of giving something up in CUSMA, then that's how they're going to handle it. By the way, the notion that Trump is going to give 6 months notice and leave this agreement has to go through Congress.
Yes.
And the midterms are coming. So, it's getting darker and darker for him to be able to actually take that opportunity to leave CUSMA.
The ultimate threat to rip up the trade deal is a massive, hollow bluff. The president literally cannot destroy this agreement without congressional approval, and with brutal midterm elections looming, the U.S. government is far too paralyzed to actually pull the trigger. Knowing that the United States is politically handcuffed, the ultimate question remains: why on earth is the Canadian government acting so incredibly weak?
But I think that, I think the challenge is that Canada is being quiet about how it's pursuing it, and it's making, I think, Canadians anxious because we don't know. Like, where is our list? Why don't we have a list of our grievances? We have a lot of grievances with the United States, whether they're trade, whether they're security, whether they're things like guns coming over the border.
This is the ultimate betrayal of the Canadian public. While Washington loudly and aggressively lists every single demand on the global stage, Ottawa is cowering in total silence instead of attacking the U.S. over massive deadly issues like illegal American firearms flooding across their borders. This silent, pathetic surrender by the Canadian government leads us to a much darker, unspoken truth about the absolute collapse of North American geopolitics. What we are witnessing right now is not just a standard trade negotiation. It is not just diplomats sitting in a boardroom arguing over the price of dairy, the origin of auto parts, or digital sales taxes. Do not let the boring, bureaucratic language fool you for a single second. What is actually unfolding before our very eyes is a ruthless, existential geopolitical chess match that will completely redefine the balance of power in North America for the next century. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are locked in a brutal standoff, and the entire concept of free trade is being actively weaponized to force sovereign nations to their knees. Listen very closely to what is happening here, because the mainstream media is completely missing the massive, terrifying bigger picture. The United States is no longer operating as a friendly neighbor or a reliable ally. Under the current political framework, Washington has transformed into an economic predator. They are using the threat of destroying the USMCA, or CUSMA, depending on which side of the border you are on, as a weapon of mass economic destruction. The American strategy is brilliantly wicked. They are not negotiating, they are extorting. By slapping absurd national security tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, the U.S. has effectively taken the Canadian economy hostage. Think about how insane that actually is. The United States is claiming that Canadian metal is a threat to American national security. It is a blatant, laughable lie, but it is a lie backed by the most powerful economic engine on the planet. Canada is now being forced to give up massive concessions on things that were already settled years ago, just to get the U.S. to remove tariffs that never should have been applied in the first place. It is a mafia-style shakedown happening on the global stage. And look at how masterfully the United States is executing the classic divide and conquer strategy. Washington knows exactly what they are doing by publicly praising Mexico while simultaneously putting Canada on the chopping block. By announcing to the world that Mexico has resolved their issues and is playing ball, the U.S. has successfully driven a massive wedge between Ottawa and Mexico City. Mexico folded. They looked at the sheer economic terror of being locked out of the U.S. market, and they capitulated. This leaves Canada completely isolated, standing alone in the cold, facing the full, undivided wrath of the American trade negotiation machine. It is a textbook psychological operation designed to induce panic within the Canadian business sector. The goal is to make Canadian CEOs so terrified of losing American market access that they force their own prime minister to sign whatever garbage deal Washington slides across the table. But here is where the story takes a dark, deeply disturbing turn that nobody saw coming. We have to talk about the chilling revelation regarding the military-industrial complex. For decades, Canada has prided itself on being the polite, peaceful neighbor to the north, a nation of peacekeepers. But this trade debate has violently ripped the mask off that illusion. The North American economies are so deeply intertwined that Canadian manufacturing is now directly feeding the American war machine. Weapons, components, and military technology manufactured in Canada are being sold to the U.S., commercialized, and then deployed in conflicts around the globe. Conflicts that are increasingly resulting in horrific war crimes. This is the ultimate cognitive dissonance for the Canadian public. They want a strong economy, they want free trade, but they are suddenly realizing that their economic lifeblood is soaked in the blood of foreign wars. This is why you are seeing desperate whispers from Canadian elites about diversifying away from the United States. They are realizing that total dependency on an aggressive, militaristic superpower is not just an economic liability, it is a profound moral and existential crisis. Canada is trapped in a toxic relationship, and the cost of doing business is their own national soul. Yet, despite all of this, despite the extortion, despite the moral rot, despite the aggressive posturing from Washington, the Canadian government's response has been nothing short of pathetic. Where is the Canadian counterattack? Where is the spine? As the panel pointed out, the United States has publicly aired a massive list of grievances against Canada. They are attacking Canadian dairy, Canadian digital taxes, Canadian auto manufacturing. They are screaming their demands from the rooftops. And what is Ottawa doing? Ottawa is hiding in the shadows. The Canadian government is staying completely quiet, hoping that if they just play nice and don't make any sudden movements, the big bad American bear will leave them alone. It is a strategy of absolute cowardice, and it is making the Canadian public incredibly anxious and furious. Canada has an absolute mountain of legitimate grievances against the United States. Why isn't Ottawa leveraging them? Why isn't the Canadian Prime Minister standing at a podium and threatening the United States over the epidemic of illegal American firearms that are constantly flooding across the undefended border, fueling gang violence in Canadian cities? Why isn't Canada threatening to cut off critical minerals and energy supplies that the U.S. desperately needs to compete with China? Canada holds incredibly powerful cards, but they are absolutely refusing to play them. By failing to present their own aggressive list of demands, Canada is signaling total weakness. In the brutal arena of international geopolitics, if you do not demand respect, you will be eaten alive. The U.S. smells blood in the water, and they know that the Canadian leadership does not have the stomach for a real fight. But here is the ultimate twist, the massive secret that Washington is desperately trying to hide from the world. The United States is bluffing. The threat to completely blow up the trade agreement and walk away by July 1st is a total fabrication. It is a phantom menace. As was brilliantly pointed out, the President of the United States does not act like a dictator when it comes to international treaties. To actually rip up the agreement, he has to give 6 months' notice, and more importantly, he has to drag that decision through a highly divided, chaotic U.S. Congress. With the American midterm elections rapidly approaching, the political climate in Washington is absolute poison. There is virtually zero chance that the U.S. Congress is going to authorize the destruction of a trade pact that millions of American jobs rely on right before they have to face the voters. The political blowback would be apocalyptic. The U.S. agricultural sector, the American auto industry, and massive multinational corporations would absolutely riot. So what does this all mean? It means we are watching a massive game of geopolitical chicken. Washington is driving a truck straight at Canada, blaring the horn, flashing the lights, and screaming that they have cut the brakes. But the truth is, the U.S. truck is out of gas, and the steering wheel is locked. The only way the United States wins this negotiation is if Canada flinches. The only way the U.S. gets the massive concessions they want is if the Canadian government allows themselves to be bullied by a phantom threat. This is no longer just about tariffs on steel or the price of milk. This is a massive stress test of national sovereignty. We are witnessing the decay of the post-World War II globalized trade system. The era of friendly, mutually beneficial free trade is dead and buried. We have entered a new, dark era of transactional, weaponized economics, where superpowers use access to their markets as a club to beat smaller nations into submission. If Canada completely caves in this negotiation, it will send a massive signal to the rest of the world. It will tell Europe, it will tell Asia, it will tell the global South that the United States can and will shatter international norms to extract wealth from its allies. It will accelerate the global push for de-dollarization and the rise of alternative economic blocs like BRICS, as nations desperately scramble to escape the suffocating grip of American economic blackmail. The next few months are going to be absolutely critical. Will Canada finally grow a spine, expose the American bluff, and fight back with their own aggressive demands? Or will Ottawa quietly surrender, signing away their economic future and their moral standing just to maintain the illusion of peace in North America? The clock is ticking, the world is watching, and the stakes have literally never been higher. Make sure you stay entirely awake, because the mainstream media is going to try to bore you to sleep with talk of trade deficits and supply chains, while the real war for the future of the continent is being fought right under your nose.